The chaotic situation inside of Georgia prisons continues to erupt today with another violent outburst that continues to very clearly spell out exactly why this problem is such an issue that needs to be addressed as immediately as possible. Hopefully, we can actually get some attention on this sometime soon before more violence continues. Now, this problem also feeds into the Valdosta area, where Valdosta State Prison has also been in been in the news recently for issues at their prison where they have had multiple employees arrested for smuggling in contraband, which also is part of a bigger problem across the entire state inside prisons, where people are cooperating inside and outside of the prison in order to move drugs, weapons, various things. So, let's talk about what happened first this morning. Very early, an inmate used a gun to kill a kitchen worker at a Georgia prison early Sunday before fatally also shooting himself. Now, really quickly, I just want to add to that. The worker, we're not just going to say just a worker. I have her name and I'm pulling it up now. I just have to see where I have that saved. But I know I have it saved here somewhere. Uh-oh, I just lost it. We'll find it before the end of the episode here. I don't want to make everybody wait. So an inmate used a gun to kill a kitchen worker. We'll bring her name up before we end this episode. The Georgia Department of Corrections in a statement said it is investigating the deaths at Smith State Prison in rural southeast Georgia. The agency provided a few immediate details, including how the inmate obtained a firearm. The agency's statement said inmate Jadricus Hart fatally shot a food service worker in the prison's kitchen at about 4:30 a.m. on Sunday, so very early this morning, then used that weapon to also kill himself. The weapon is in GDC custody at this time, and a complete and thorough investigation of what led up to this tragic incident will be carried out, according to investigators. The agency spokeswoman Lori Benoit provided no further information, also to multiple outlets when they reached out today. The kitchen worker, 24-year-old Ariane Shavia Grace of Statesboro, had worked at the prison since January. According to the Corrections Department, she was employed by Aramark, a Philadelphia based company that provides food service to prisons in Georgia, and they do all over in other places as well. Across the state, they're like a contracted, for people who don't know who they are, they're like a place where you can contract different things for that are widely needed by various businesses. So this is incredibly sad because this problem has been allowed to go on for far too long, to where people are so well coordinated inside and outside of the prison system, to the point where they are manipulating, harassing, threatening people outside. They're getting to people who are on the inside. They're able to extort money, move contraband, drugs, weapons, different things. Let's go over a couple of articles that have gone through the news just since early this year to now, because this has been an ongoing problem and it just doesn't seem to be getting any better with this morning's news of this shooting. And there's also a picture of the inmate, and that inmate was he was serving like a 20-year sentence, I want to say, um, for two different charges. However, this is like I think this is in here. Yeah, he was serving a 20 years sentence for voluntary manslaughter out of Carroll County, with a maximum release date of June 2043. So sad for everybody involved, because a lot of people, when you want to allocate money to the prison system, to the correctional system. Sorry, my pup is going wild, and I'm trying to get this recorded to put out. Um, if When you want to allocate money in that direction, people don't like it because they think they're in prison. Why should they get new facilities? Why should they get this? Why should they get that? Why should we pour all this money into a system that is meant to house the worst people in society? Well, there are a lot of people in prison. Some are not there for lengthy times, some are there for lengthy times, and there are people in there to keep them in there. And I've said for a while that we are at a great risk right now for major, major problems um, to break out in our prison systems. We're at a breaking point. So, sorry, I don't know if the pups yips are coming through. Anyhow, the Georgia prisons are full. They are understaffed. They are having problems all over the map, and this isn't just Georgia, but Georgia is one of those that is suffering the worst. Okay, let's read this real quick. So, there are almost 51,000 people incarcerated by the state of Georgia, and that's the highest number that's seen in 15 years. This is an article from the Georgia Public Broadcasting Network. Uh, the number of Georgia correctional officers is at its lowest this century. So, just yeah, that's not a good combination. Um, you've got one of the highest numbers you've seen in over a century of people incarcerated, and one of the lowest numbers of officers employed. Reports of violence inside of the Georgia prisons have continued to spike since COVID-19 during the pandemic. And on Thursday, crossover day for the state legislator, advocates for um, family members of people inside of the state prison system plan to go to the Capitol. And this is an old article from this year, though. This is from back in February. They plan to go to the Capitol and try to get legislators to understand how they say civil rights of the people they love are violated. Um, there's been a lot of action through advocacy and different things. And what I was going to say is, yeah, it is at times a place where we house the worst of society, but it's also, like I said, a place where we employ people to keep them in there, and to keep everyone involved safe. So, and having their basic human rights met. The Georgia prison systems and many prison systems in our country are not meeting basic human rights, and that is a problem because not first of all, you don't want to become a country that has the same mindset of the criminals that we're housing in prisons, um, and you don't want to have this widespread disparagement of rights being violated when you do have a lot of people that go in there that are serving shorter sentences, not in there for violent crimes. It's a whole different ball game, and we do have different levels of prison systems for that reason. But we still see a crossover of inmates going here and going there. So you don't know who you might be serving your time with, and it needs to be safe for everybody involved. So the warden, there back in March, a Georgia prison warden was stabbed by an inmate. The inmate was stabbed during a disturbance. Officers used tear gas to regain control. The state prison's warden, Andrew McFarlane, was not seriously injured. The warden was treated by facility medical personnel for superficial wounds and is expected to be okay. They had reported at the time. The disturbance began around 11:30 in the morning. when staff members were conducting a shakedown to remove contraband from a dorm, but those in the dorm refused to comply with the lockdown. And that's what you'll have. When you begin to be outnumbered, then they start calling the shots. At that time, an inmate assaulted the warden with a homemade weapon. They're lucky it didn't end more brutally, as many situations in the last year or so have at the Georgia prisons. Um, the facility remains on lockdown, and that's usually what they do. That's what they're doing today um, over in Glenville. They are on lockdown after this shooting occurred inside the prison. So we did talk about it on the Titletown Scanner social media, but back in April, there were 150 people arrested for using drones to transport contraband into Georgia prisons. They formed Operation Skyhawk. We talked a little bit about that, I think, even in one of our lives. Um, Officials say that 150 people, including 8 Georgia Department of Corrections employees, were arrested after a massive investigation into contraband at prisons around the state. They also showed up at Valdosta and made arrest of those employees as well. Search and arrest warrants were served at 2 facilities in the metro Atlanta area, leading to the dismantling of a sophisticated multi state criminal enterprise operated by inmates, Department of Corrections staff, and civilians who were bringing contraband into prisons. And I believe that they're possibly trying to make a RICO case out of some of this. They had seized 185 pounds of tobacco, 67 pounds of marijuana, 51 pounds of ecstasy, 20 or 12 pounds of meth. They seized cocaine, pills, almost 90 drones, weapons, 450 cell phones. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that they uncovered. That's just what they found. I always said, just what they found. It's rare that everything is found. Another issue that happened back in December of last year was families being extorted or coming forward. It's very rare that families actually come forward about being extorted, but this one did. They say inmates were texting or calling and threatening to hurt their family members who were incarcerated there. This is not uncommon at all, and that's why you see high profile, as in when you financially high profile, like when you have people go into the prison system with a lot of money. They're like, oh, they're protecting the rich. No, they're protecting everyone involved, including the people who have to protect that person, because they do get extorted and their lives are at a greater risk than other people in the prison system because unfortunately and they end up usually having a more solitary prison existence where they're locked up in their own cell most of the time, and they don't get as much interaction with other people in the prison and things like that because of their status, and because that there is an ongoing either ongoing threat on their life or a possible threat on their life that they try to avoid. So that's part of that. They got the extortion call the first night that he was at the prison. He wasn't even there 12 hours when this happened. The family member requested that their name not be used in the story out of safety concern. Don't blame them. She said, or they said, whoever it is, I answered, and it was our son who sounded petrified. He's like, just do what they're asking. Send the money to the Cash App that they texted you. After 10 minutes later, we got another call, and instead of 100, it was now 200. He was pleading with me, please just give them the money. However, the couple wasn't familiar with how to use Cash App. They called their local police department as well as the prison. The published number is only monitored Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., according to what the recording says. So there was no way of getting in touch with the GDC directly. Eventually, they got in touch with someone at Butts County 911 who was able to contact the prison directly. They said that prison guards were able to relocate their son to a different part of the prison. Thankfully, they didn't end up having to pay the extortion demands. However, at least two other families who contacted the same news article, it's by Fox 5. They also contacted Fox 5 and said that they did pay out of fear for their loved one after getting similar threats from inmates. These families paid as much as $500 to meet demands, and these are low amounts for what's usually demanded. Um, says despite their family paying their demands, their son had to be taken to the hospital and was later released. After Lori and Franklin found out about that their son was okay a few days later, Franklin offered to provide a Jackson prison employee who spoke on the phone with them the Cash App handle and the numbers for the contraband cell phone so that they could investigate further. Like I said, most people just pay it. Most people don't do this. They don't, they don't want anything to happen. They know it's going to be a whole thing while their family member is in custody and their life is the one mostly at risk. They don't want to play that game, so most people don't come forward and they just pay it more than not. Um, and like I said, there was like 150 different people arrested in these operations that are working with prison inmates. There was another story back in May that people may remember seeing. May 29th, end of Mayish. A Georgia correctional officer was charged with murder in the death of a state prison inmate, a rare charge that adds a new dimension to the ongoing crisis related to violence and corruption within the Georgia Department of Corrections. Lloyd Hopkins, a correctional officer at Augusta State Medical Prison, was charged with murder, aggravated assault, and violation of oath in office in connection with the death of Roderick Hayes. Two other inmates, Brendan Moore and Andy Ulysses, were charged with felony murder and aggravated assault. Hayes died the Saturday after this happened, and was immediately fired. Hopkins was immediately fired, according to the GDC. Said that Hopkins had worked as an officer at the prison of Groveton since 2021, according to the Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council. He's being held without bond at the Columbia County Jail. I actually have a follow up, I believe, on this story if anybody's interested, because I did look into that a bit. Federal judge imposes fines, and a monitor on Georgia prisons was also reported back in April. In a blistering 100-page contempt order, a federal judge has found Georgia Department of Corrections officials willfully disregarded requirements to improve deplorable conditions inside the high security special management unit prison. The judge, the chief judge of the U.S. District Court in Macon, said GDC officials over several years violated every requirement. Not just most, not just many, not just, they did a lot of, avoided a lot of these requirements. No, they violated every requirement he has placed on the prison system. And when officials asked for more time and promised to do better, they continued to ignore the requirements. It became clear. Sounds like their adoption system, too. It became clear, the judge wrote, that prison officials had no desire or intention to comply. They were simply stalling, hoping the case would end before they would have to make the changes. The court can no longer tolerate the defendant's misconduct, and for the reasons discussed below, holds the defendants in contempt. Treadwell ordered the appointment of an independent monitor at the prison system's expense. You need to fix your stuff and you need to pay for it too. To keep watch on compliance with the requirements, he also imposed a $2,500 a day fine for failure to comply with this order to improve conditions. Well, yeah, how can you improve anything if you're going to put yourself in a position to pay fines like this? This is ridiculous. Because of the defendant's long-standing and flagrant violations of the court's injunction, the court finds that coercive sanctions are necessary to compel compliance. That is so sad. GDC Commissioner Tyrone Oliver and GDC Director of Field Operations Stan Shepard are among one of the named defendants. A spokeswoman for the Georgia Department of Corrections said Monday that the agency would not comment on the legal matter. This isn't a legal matter. This is a matter of human rights safety for employees, for prisoners, for everyone involved, anyone visiting that prison, anybody coming anywhere near that building. It is about everybody. This is insane. The case began in 2015 when Timothy Gunn, who was then incarcerated at the Special Management Unit, filed a lawsuit challenging the conditions of his solitary confinement. He had been confined to a cell for years, without regular time outside or human contact with anyone except for a correctional officer who delivered his food trays. The case grew to cover others, and attorneys from the Southern Center for Human Rights were called in by the court to represent an entire class of prisoners. Yeah, this is just, it's really not good. And I know people hate to hear about stuff like this because they don't want to have compassionate thoughts about people who are in prison. But the reality is what the reality is, and a civilized country does not act this way. That we just we're not we're not supposed to be a people who treat others this way. It's inhumane, and there's not a single requirement that they're meeting for anyone, even for their basic human rights. Okay, let me get through the rest of these because my pup here is vying for some attention. Um, so there was another instance where a warden was attacked with a homemade weapon again. Um, and Valdosta State Prison also had five officers, employees of the prison that were arrested as well for smuggling in contraband. Um, this is a issue that goes across the entire state, like I said before. So Operation Skyhawk is what's been going through the state, trying to catch a lot of this activity and hone in on it. It's just, as always, it's not quite fast enough, as another life was lost too, actually. There's no proper mental health help for the prisoners. There's no proper anything. So there will be more of this until it gets resolved. All right, we'll be back.